episode of the Claws Corner. Today's guest is a cave explorer that I first met while vacationing with my wife in South Dakota. I began telling him about my adventure as part of the Wind Cave Wild Cave Tour, and he told me how he got his start spelunking and some of the exciting explorations that he has been on. So I knew immediately that he would make a great guest. So without further ado, please welcome Chris Pelczarski to the Claws Corner. Chris, how are you?
Hey, great, Rich. Thanks for having me on the show.
Oh yeah. Well, as I mentioned in the intro, I met you several years ago. I was on vacation in South Dakota, and I went on this Wind Cave, it was called the Wild Cave Tour. For you, it was probably nothing, but for me, it was great. Go 200 feet underground and go through all these little dark caverns and holes. And I don't know who I was speaking with, but they said, if you want to know more about this cave, there's this great guy. He works at this restaurant. So my wife and I said, hey, let's take a walk down there. We did. And it was funny because you happened to be the person that waited on us. We started talking, and I had you on my other show, which unfortunately all the audio was lost, but now it's even better because I love YouTube. I love Zoom, and a lot more people see it. So welcome back.
Hey, thanks.
So I mentioned the Wind Cave, and that's in South Dakota. Very recently, you did some explorations there. Tell me about that.
Yeah, we did. So we went with Dr. Hazel Barton. She is a cave explorer, caver, and also actually she's one of the world's leading cave microbiologists. She runs a lab in Ohio. She has this area that she's been working on in Wind Cave. Now I suppose I should kind of explain what I mean by an area that she's working on. Some of these massive caves in the United States, they can amount to hundreds of miles of cave passage. And Wind Cave in particular, it's actually, it's a very complex maze cave. It has nearly 160 miles of cave passage. But believe it or not, all 160 miles of that is located under 1 square mile of land.
Really? Wow.
So, yeah. And it's not, but it's like a honeycomb, but it's not like a honeycomb where everything just connects. It's like a honeycomb where you might go this way for 1,000 feet before you find a hole that goes up, before you can go back this way, before you find a hole that goes down to a much bigger room below everything. You know, you're going around in circles when you're crawling around in Wind Cave. And without the work of past explorers, you would never be able to reach the fringes of what's been explored in the cave. So the tricky thing about exploring in Wind Cave is that very, very small holes can lead to a great amount of cave passage. And sometimes they're so obscure, these little tiny holes. You know, you're in a great big passage, say you're in a passage 30 feet tall and 20 feet wide, and you're walking down it and you can see 100 feet, you think, well, that's where all the cave is going to be, down there in that black area. And, you know, eventually that comes to an end, right? And it turns out the way on to a bunch more cave is through this little tiny basketball-sized hole off on the side wall behind a rock that you didn't even notice when you walked by. And there's thousands of places like that in Wind Cave. And so people develop, explorers who volunteer for the National Park Service, they develop areas of interest that they think, okay, I want to go push this area. I want to go see if this cave goes anywhere. And we call, in cave exploration, we call a passage that no one has ever been in that we know of. I guess I shouldn't say no one's ever been in it, but I should really say that hasn't been mapped. If no one's mapped that passage, we call it a lead. Like, in other words, it's like, you know, think like the detective movie. It's like, hey, I've got a lead. You know, where's the cave? Oh, I got a good lead. It's here. Like a good idea of where the cave might go. And so there's like thousands of leads in the cave documented on a map. And you can go to any one of those leads in the cave if you're, you know, in the program, and which you need to be highly qualified to be in. But you go to these leads and you don't know if they're going to go 20 feet in a belly crawl and come to an end, or if you're going to squeeze under a ledge and under a wall and find one of the newest, biggest rooms in Wind Cave. And so Hazel Barton had this area that she had been working on, hoping that it would go somewhere called it was kind of part of an earlier breakout called the Western Fringe. And then right before COVID started, she got into a passage known as that she actually called the Revenge Fantasy. I'm not entirely sure what the story behind that one is. And we do get to name passages when we find them. So she makes this, cool discovery, and there's lots of little passages off to the side to discover. But the really cool thing about this area is that it has airflow, and airflow is very significant in a cave because, so this particular type of airflow is called barometric, and you can think of a barometer, it has to do with air pressure, right? Barometric air occurs in large caves when there's a great volume of cave passage, and the outside air, like just out in the open, when the outside air pressure changes, air is always trying to equalize pressure, right? Like wind and all that outside. Well, same thing in a cave. When the air pressure outside changes, the air in a cave, that air tries to equalize pressure with the air outside. So it's either rushing out or sucking into the cave. And if there's this huge volume of air in the cave, but it all has to equalize through one place, you're going to get strong wind in that cave passage. And so that could be at the entrance, which is actually why it's called Wind Cave. And they can get wind over 60 miles an hour at that entrance. Or, it can also be at a critical passage within the cave. So at a place where the whole cave funnels down to one critical connection, and then it branches out again. So that was what we were hoping was kind of the case with the Revenge Fantasy area, because we found an area that had a lot of wind. I mean, if you see behind me, my background, it's this white, crazy looking arborescent tree looking stuff. That's called Frostwork. And Frostwork it's a mineral made of aragonite. And that is a good sign of airflow because it has to precipitate. So evaporation can cause that mineral to come out of the solution, basically. And there's a place in the Revenge Fantasy where I think they called it, they might have called it Final Fantasy. I wasn't on that trip, but Final Fantasy, it's a passage, like 8 feet wide, maybe 6 feet tall. No, sorry, it's not 6 feet tall. It's like 3 feet tall. But it's a tube passage lined 100% with like what's behind me. It's just like bright white glistening, and you have to carefully crawl through, damaging as little as possible. So yeah, just last weekend? 2 weekends ago. 2 weekends ago, we set out to return to Hazel's area that she had been working on. And we were hoping to make a big breakthrough because on the trip prior, which I was not on, they had discovered a giant room, and the cave had finally started getting good. And they also found a huge pit that they needed to rappel to get down, and left many, many leads to go back to. So we're like, all right, we're just psyched to go to this place. And team of 6 of us went out. You know, getting to this place, if I can describe it, it's I don't know the distance in terms of actual like feet traveled, but it takes experienced cavers like 3.5 hours, maybe 4 hours to reach this place. And I would say 75% of that time is crawling. So, you know, imagine just crawling and crawling and crawling for 2-3 hours at a time. You know, and you have all that time as you're crawling out there, you have all that time to think, what are we going to discover? You know, what are we going to find? It's a lot of anticipation. So we reach this area and we divide into 2 teams of 3. And our first several leads didn't really pan out. Things were getting small and really difficult to continue. And I tell you some of the things that kind of go through your mind when you're out there. First of all, if it's not clear, I know not everybody understands this right away. These are places that no human being has ever been. So I want to make that clear that you know, we know that no human being has been to these places ever. And you know, you have expectations of what you're going to find. And so when passages start getting really small, even though a small passage can lead on to something really great, you're squirming, trying to push through this hole, and you're going, I didn't travel all the way out here for this. This sucks, you know. And now a little bit of that was what was happening, is we're like, man, this area just sucks. And we just, you know, we kind of actually lost a little bit of our groove. You know, we decided to leave that area and go to some of the other leads that we knew started out better. And so we went on to another area, and that ended up getting really small too. And you know, that's kind of part of the thing about being an explorer, I think, just in general. You know, I've probably mapped in my lifetime now, just in various caves, mostly around the Black Hills, but all over the country. I probably mapped like 50 miles of like virgin terrain, I would bet. And you know, you kind of learn something about what it means to be an explorer. And I'll tell you one thing, a couple things that you learn. One is that you can't really go in with expectations. I mean, you sure can, but it's going to really impact how you're exploring that place. And then the other thing is that you really have to keep an open mind, and you really have to just be willing to be thorough and not lose hope. Because a lot of great things are beyond these really difficult squeezes sometimes. But in the moment, you're sitting there like, there's not going to be anything beyond this. Why am I here? Right? It's just like life, right? It's just like pushing through life. You have these difficult moments, and at times in life, you can't believe that it's going to be worth it to get to the other side.
Well, sometimes if you have low expectations, it makes it even better, because you're like, I'm not going to find anything. This is going to be horrible. And then when you do, wow, this is amazing. I mean, you've done this for so long. We're going to get into how you got started in it, but I would just be amazed, and I would love just going through all the tunnels, digging, and everything. It's what I'd be afraid of. And I want to ask you if this ever happened to you. I would be so afraid of getting lost miles and miles underground.
You know, it's interesting that you say that. I mean, it has happened in a really big cave. One of my friends did get lost, and I actually almost got lost one time. But you can imagine if there's Going Cave, and it's a place no human beings ever been to, and you are suddenly lost, man, that's like being in outer space and dangling off. And it's like in the movies where you got like one hand holding on to the spaceship. You're like, don't let go, or I'll be like gone forever. Like you're barely clinging to reality. You let go of that, and you are in no man's land. No one knows what's there.
When you and your friend got lost at separate times, when you got lost on your own, were you by yourself, or were you with a group of people, and the 2 or 3 of you got lost together?
Well, so when I got lost, it was in a place where we were in some small passages, and we were hoping that my friend Adam and I, we were hoping that this passage would lead to more cave. And so when you're mapping a cave, and there's a little bit of a caving ethic that you map as you go, mainly because mapping is work, and so the thought process behind it all is that it isn't right for someone to enjoy the thrill of discovery but not do the work of mapping and make someone else do the work of mapping, right? So if you get to run around and see where all the great cave is and then go, cool, well, now I know where it all is, then there's not much motivation to say, cool, let's map it, right? Especially if it comes to an end. So Adam and I were and that's called scooping, when you run around. And I'm of a little bit of a mindset that like some scooping is kind of necessary to try to figure out where the cave goes, because sometimes you think it's going to go one place and then it ends, and it just gets kind of complicated. So a little bit of scooping to kind of like scout the way is necessary, but sometimes the excitement gets the best of you. And my friend Adam and I were in this area, and we went through some crawlways, and I actually didn't really think it was going to go anywhere. And then lo and behold, it was like, oh, this is starting to look really good. So I scrambled up onto this ledge, and it was a dramatic change. It went from a crawlway to like immediately I was at this great big pit, probably 40 feet deep, 20 feet across. And I could stand up, and I was like, wow. We later ended up naming this passage the Call of the Void. Have you ever heard of the phrase the Call of the Void?
I have.
For those that don't know, it's French originally, and it's like it's the Call of the Void is when your mind kind of wanders, and it has nothing to do with suicide, but it's more like along the lines of like you're driving and you think it just crosses your mind, like, what would happen if I just turned into oncoming traffic?
Yeah.
That's not like I want to do that, but just like, what would happen if I did? Or when it's the urge to jump off a cliff when you're near the edge. Not like because you want to kill yourself, but because you like wonder what it would feel like, kind of. That's the Call of the Void. So we ended up naming this big passage the Call of the Void, this big deep pit, because you couldn't climb down it, and we didn't jump down it either. Don't worry.
Glad to hear that. I'm glad you didn't put your friend down it either.
Right,
what happened.
Yeah. Well, but what happened is I rushed into this room, and I was like, wow. And I started yelling for my friend, Adam, and I was yelling, it goes. And I turn around and I went into the passage I thought I came out of. But it turns out there was one right behind me that looked very similar. There was 2 passages that led into that room. And so I'm running. I'm just so excited. I'm running. I'm like, Adam, it goes. And I go through a couple obstacles, and then I look around and I'm like, hey, I don't really recognize this, And then I'm like, Adam? And I'm like looking around, and I'm like, oh my gosh, it was terrifying, and I backtracked, found the hole again, found the Call of the Void. And then after that, I was able to realize that, okay, there was 2 holes and I went in the wrong one. So that one ended up happy.
I'm glad that one ended up happy. What about your friend, not Adam, but you said there was another friend of yours that got lost at one time. What happened with
Yeah,
him?
there was another, and this was the same kind of thing. They were on the edge of the cave. And this one was pretty real deal. They were on the edge of the cave and they were pushing to, I wasn't on this trip. This was back in 2011, and they were pushing a difficult part of the cave that took like 7 hours to travel to, and there's no camp in the cave or anything. So, this team was actually spending like planning to spend like 20 some hours in the cave, like 7 hours of travel out, few hours of survey, 7 hours back, all in one go without sleeping. And you have a very specific amount of supplies. It's actually, caving is actually a very calculated activity in that you essentially have no resources. You have nothing to improvise with other than what you bring in, but you can bring very little. So everything that you decide you want to bring is pretty crucial. And so you really weigh out like, okay, I'm going to travel to this point in the cave. I'm going to stop. I'm going to eat one piece of food, and drink about a half a liter of water. Okay, then we're going to travel here. I'm going to need probably 3/4 of a liter of water because that section's kind of hard. You really plan it all out like that. So this team was out at the end, and they really wanted to know, like, their time was up for survey and it was time to leave. And they're like, well, we really want to know, is it worth it to come back out here, or is this going to come to an end? So they're like, what, Kelly, why don't you just dash under that ledge there and just see if it goes? He's like, okay. And he goes under the ledge and he's gone for 5 minutes, 10 minutes, 15 minutes. 15 minutes, they're starting to go, okay, hope he's all right. 20 minutes, they're like, he should not be gone 20 minutes. This is getting to be bad. They started to look for him a little bit. 30 minutes, they're like, okay, we have a lost person, potentially injured. They searched for him for 4 hours. They could not find him. They could hear him the whole time pounding rocks on the wall. And you can hear that. You can actually hear that from a very, very long ways away in the cave. They were getting to the point where they were using up their resources to get themselves out of the cave safely. And they're like, what do we do? And I've heard, had this story described to me where they basically, it was unspoken, but they all knew they had to leave, and they all felt, we're leaving our friend in the cave to die, because what's he gonna do? This is, people, I know some of you have probably been in caves, but these are very remote environments where there's no organic life other than microbes. There's no surface material, plants. It's rock. It's rock and air and water sometimes. Yeah. And so, yeah, they're like, well, wow. I mean, if we leave, like, we spend 7 hours getting out. We tell people, hey, Kelly, our friend Kelly's lost. And then spend 7 hours, once a team is assembled, spend 7 hours going back in, and then they're back at square one. And that team had already spent 4 hours looking for him. What's the next team going to do? And so they're like, well, we don't know what to do. So there are actually like rescue caches in this particular cave. And so they were able to, get a rescue cache that has a little bit of food and a sleeping bag. And they were actually able to leave that there for him. And they left him a note saying, good luck, we'll be back. Yeah.
No,
And,
I know why they did it, but the way you're saying, it sounds kind of funny. It's like, all right, he's on his own. I guess we don't have to buy him a Christmas card next year.
yeah.
No, I understand. Because
yeah,
instead of having one person, instead of having 5 people perish, it's one. So I mean, it sounds cruel, but I completely understand that. But it's good that they did leave him the sleeping bag, some food.
Yeah.
And was he able to get to the sleeping bag and food?
So what ended up happening is, what eventually happened is, as they left, they rounded the corner, and there he was sitting on the main trail, the main travel route. We use it's the same travel route, like kind of like arteries, to get kind of like highways in the cave to get different places. And so, he he had found his way back to the trail via a different way, I think. And once he found that, he was like, okay, I know they're still looking for me. I'm just going to wait here. And that was the right thing to do. Of course, the mix up in what happened was just kind of like my mix up. When they said, okay, go on in and see if there's anything in there. Well, there was 2 holes, and everybody on the team thought he went in the one hole. So they spent 4 hours looking in this one hole for him, and he actually went in the other one. And he said, he was like, why haven't they found me yet? I'm 30 feet away from where I started, and he just got a little turned around and just decided, I'm just going to sit here and wait, And the last thing I'll really say about this is that, I mean, this place in this cave, it's one of the most, to help you understand how serious this is, it is one of the most remote places a human being can go on planet Earth, anywhere. With no possibility for communication. So, it's rugged.
I'm guessing you can't bring, I'm sure your phones don't work down there, but you don't have some kind of communication where, a beeper or something like, all right, I'll let you know where I am, and we could not text each other, but get in communication with each other. You don't have anything like that at all?
There's nothing like that that works. There can be like 1,000 feet of rock between you and the surface. There have been people who have invented, really cool things like, there is a way you can send a text message through like 1,000 feet of rock, but it's not just like at a whim. Like there's a lot involved in it. And you actually have to do like a radio location where you have a pretty good idea of where that person is in the cave when you're on the surface. And you have to go, as close to as you can to where you think that person is on the surface. And the people in the cave have a device that emits a radio wave, a very low frequency, and it can be detected on the surface. But that's how you kind of match up a location on the surface. And once you have that location set up, there is a way that, like, if one person is in that spot in the cave and another person is in that spot on the surface, then you could send a text message with ultra low frequency wave messaging. But that is like the only way.
What about drones? Can you use drones down there? Not even just to find somebody, but maybe a smaller area, you could put the drone in there and see what's on the other side?
It hasn't been done. I don't think a drone would survive the trip.
Okay.
And that's another thing, is caves are such harsh environments that like sensitive equipment just doesn't make it. So it has to be like ruggedized, So
what's the longest you've spent in a cave? How many days?
So I've done an 8-day trip in La Chiquilla Cave.
That's South Dakota?
That's actually in New Mexico.
Oh.
Yeah. Yeah, La Chiquilla Cave is another really big cave. I think it's about 150 miles, I think. No, it's over 150. I should know how long that one is, but I haven't actually been to that cave very much. So but yeah, 8 days underground, kind of, it gets to be a long time, even, even for someone who likes it, that's a long time.
The only thing for me that would really get to me is that there's no porta potties down there.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, you
After a
carry out
couple
all your,
hours.
you carry out all your waste. And so, yeah, that's kind of a lot of work.
The other thing I would be worried about, and I'm not sure if you ever encountered this or have heard stories, is when you're going through a small tunnel, crawling through to see what's on the other side, and you hit something and there's an avalanche and you're stuck in there. That would what I'd be afraid of as well.
Oh, okay. Yeah, like a cave collapse.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, that's always a possibility in a cave. I was just thinking about a pretty good story that I have about a very small cave called Hugh Cave. That was a newly discovered cave here in South Dakota a number of years ago, and it's surveyed a little over a mile in length. And but this particular cave, it's different from the other area caves. It's just kind of a stream cave, and so the passages actually it's not as complex as these other massive maze caves, like Wind Cave. But Hugh Cave has a lot of like really narrow slots, narrow fissures. And in fact, like the entrance is basically like a 70-foot deep crack in a stream bed. And it's like about 10 inches wide. So it's about as wide as a person's chest. And you just kind of slide and shimmy down. Way out at the end, my friend Dan and I, takes about an hour to get to this place. My friend Dan and I went, and we kind of broke into a new area. And there was another one of these deep cracks in that area of the cave. And Dan ended up going down it while I was up above. And where I climbed up above, up high, the rock was actually very loose. So I knew I was knocking a lot of material down, and Dan was kind of below me, and it was all funneling into where he was. And I was just kind of like, okay, I can't leave. I'm knocking too much stuff down. I got to wait till he comes back. And so I kind of just perched and tried to get really stable and really still. And so I hear Dan and I hear all this hear a bunch of F-bombs just over his, oh no, just over and over and over again. And I'm like, what is going on? What had happened, which is really crazy. So he was not trying to go all the way down this crack because he didn't even know if he could fit. Well, the whole crack was coated in silt, kind of like the bottom of a river, like all that really like, and it's very slippery, very, very fine, silty. And it just had this like 16th inch coating on everything. And as he was kind of moving this way in the crack, he said he started just sliding down like really, really slow. And he said it was the scariest thing in the world because no matter what he did, he's pushing out with his arms like, come on, stop, wedging himself, and he's just sliding really low. And he's looking down like, I don't even know if I can fit down there. Like I might just get wedged. And he could not stop himself from sliding. He slid like 30 feet to the bottom of this crack, and he did fit through the whole thing. And then he was like, yeah, then he was like, well, if I couldn't even stop myself from sliding, how am I going to climb up this thing? And so I sat perched up above in this loose rock zone, just listening to him just thrash and struggle for like an hour. And I'm yelling, Dan, and he couldn't hear me, but I could hear him. And I had no idea what was going on. I'm like, what is he stuck? What's going on? So yeah, we believe it or not. Well, so after that, we were like, let's get the hell out of here.
Well, how
So
did you get him back up?
He climbed up.
Oh, he did.
It took him
Finally.
like an hour. Took him like an hour, and it took like every bit of energy that he had. But he climbed back up. And I mean, that was a close call. You know, we're just like, let's get out of here. Believe it or not, we did go back, and we we
Back to
didn't
the
learn
scene of
our
the
lesson.
crime.
Yeah. We brought a rope the next time. Dan wouldn't go down. I decided, okay, I can go down. I could see exactly why he had so much trouble. We mapped it. It all ended down there. We used the rope to get ourselves up. It was miserable, but it wasn't scary that time having a rope. And we ended up naming that passage the Suck.
Perfect name for that.
Oh yeah, it sucked, and it sucked him down into the crack too. So
Literally and figuratively.
yeah.
Who hires you to investigate or explore these caves?
What inspires me?
No. Who hires you?
Oh, who hires?
Yes.
Sorry, yeah, it broke up for a second. You know, we actually don't even do, most of the time we don't do this for pay at all.
Okay.
So all the small caves, you know, that's all just for fun. A lot of times, like private landowners, if a landowner owns a cave, you know, we like doing it. We like mapping caves, so we'll often approach a landowner if we know they have a cave and say, you know, we'll make you a beautiful map if you'd like, and if you let us in the cave, we'll make you this map and show you where your cave goes and take cool pictures and show you what you got. You know, usually they're pretty agreeable to that. There's you know, there's federally owned caves too. The federal government actually owns a majority of like the really cool caves. And most of that exploration is done under like a volunteer program. Some very lucky people get paid, but most of us do it just for fun.
And you mentioned how difficult it is to go into most of these caves, and it should be experts going in there. Do you have to go through some kind of test to be able to say, yep, Chris is okay to investigate or explore this cave?
Yeah, you do. Normally, pretty much like all the different caves, it's interesting. It's sort of like a secret society, and it's not meant to mean that like we aren't open to other people knowing about the caves or getting access, but it's more like the knowledge and the methods have to be passed down. And so if somebody's interested in caving, we'll often start them out on, you know, some kind of smaller cave, take them something a little bit harder. If they're a known athlete already, like say they're a climber, a rock climber, and we know they're like a super good rock climber, you might start them out on something a little bit harder, because climbers usually tend to be pretty good at caving also. But yeah, I mean, it's just kind of like passing the torch, you know, on and we just kind of train people up on our own for whatever cave we're working on. As far as the federal government caves go, I mean, they do have standards that have to be met, but mostly they have to trust the people who are going in the cave to train someone and recommend them for the harder trips.
How did you get your start?
Oh, that's a great question. You know, I actually started as a rock climber. So, so I'm in South Dakota now. You might notice a little bit of an accent. I'm from Chicago suburbs, and I got interested in moving out west after I worked at a summer camp in Montana for a few summers, and just kind of ended up here in the Black Hills, and was getting into climbing. And you know, I ended up losing a job back in 2007, and or 2008, I guess, and worked some odd jobs for a little bit. And by about 2009, I kind of decided, you know, I mean, if I'm going to go for it, this is better time than any. I don't have a job, I'm broke, but I really like climbing. You know, I got that. Got a little bit of angst, you know. Don't fully fit in society. So what the hell? I'll just go for it. I knew about this place called Poverty Gulch. And it's a place where climbers kind of would camp out. And it was March, and I gave away most of my possessions, kept some stuff, and just stored it at a friend's house. You know, terminated my lease on my apartment, and moved into my tent. And that was the summer of 2012. Well, March, it wasn't exactly summer. I definitely remember like just laying in my tent freezing quite a bit. Most of the climbers that show up kind of show up more like April, May, when it gets a little warmer. But yeah, it was like, this is my big summer for climbing. I'm going to climb my butt off. And you know, there's this pioneer couple named Herb and Jan Kahn, and they're actually from East Coast, New York and Connecticut, I think. And they lived out in the DC area, and they did some climbing, and this was in like the 40s, and they ended up here in the Black Hills, and they ended up being pioneer rock climbers for, you know, 15 years or so, 15 to 20 years, and did first ascents of all these pinnacles. This area is great for caves, but it's also great for climbing, and there's all these little pinnacle needles. They call them the needles. And the Kahns actually climbed like 240 pinnacles for the first time in the area, mapped them all out, named them. And you know, everybody knows how popular climbing has gotten recently, right? It's mainstream, there's movies, and people know more. The general population knows more about climbing than they've ever known. Well, in 1959, climbing got too popular for Herb and Jan, believe it or not. They were quite the couple, and there was a local geologist they had befriended, who was also a climber they had done some climbing with, and he was in school in Wyoming. And one day he said to them, you know what you do when it gets cold? You go climb in the caves. And they knew of this cave nearby that they said that Dwight Deal was mapping, and it was 3,000 feet long. And currently that cave is 210 miles long. So pretty cool. So yeah, the Kahns, they started exploring actively in this cave. And you know, everyone who climbs here, they know who Herb and Jan Kahn is. They're legends in the way that they lived their life. They're legends in the way that they dedicated themselves to just what they love to do in such a pure style and fashion. Many people model their lives around Herb and Jan Kahn, who live in this area and know about him. And,
I love watching documentaries, and I can't remember the name of it, but I did see a documentary that featured them prominently. But the two that come to mind is definitely Free Solo, that Alex Honnold pretty much put climbing on the map for a lot of people that had no idea what climbing was. There was a lot more before. There's another one called Dirtbag, which I can't remember his name, but he was one of the original climbers. And I think maybe that's where they were mentioned. And the last one just came out recently. He's a French climber, and he used to do ice climbing.
Oh yeah, the Alpinist.
Yes, the Alpinist. That was the last documentary on climbing I saw. That guy is not, even for Alex Honnold, who I think is crazy. He goes, I'm controlled crazy. This guy is just nuts. For him to say that, and unfortunately, without giving anything away, you know what happened. So it's but you know what? You know what's funny with all the climbers? I'm not sure if you have this mentality, but a lot of them always say, you know what? If I die, I die. I'm dying doing what I love. I don't see a lot of fear of death with any of these explorers or cavers or climbers.
Mm-hmm.
Do you have that same mentality?
You know, to be honest, I don't think about it very often. I don't, when I'm in the cave, I don't often think, you know, yeah, I could die. It's a little more, it's a little less dramatic than climbing, where when you look at like Alex Honnold and some of these other and Marc-Andre Leclerc and all these other climbers, you know, and look at what they're doing. I mean, the danger is just obvious. and they're right on that. They're really walking that line. In the cave, I mean, you're walking a line a little bit, but it's not quite as obvious of danger. It's not quite as precarious as what some of these free soloists are doing. Although there have been accidents in the cave, there have been close calls, and it has crossed my mind that one day I may see a friend die in the cave. And that is not enough to stop me from going. And I'll tell you why. Exploration. I mean, it's the opportunity to go to a place that no human being's ever been. You know, it's pretty cool. You get to further humanity and the knowledge of our planet, the knowledge of that place. And there's nothing more exciting.
I have never done anything near to what you're doing, but I agree with you. I grew up when my grandfather was the head of a hiking and caving club, and he used to take my brothers and I all over the place. In Connecticut, there's not really big caves, but it's fun nonetheless. And we used to go in all these different little caves, and I still love doing things like that. So I always had interest in that. And that's why, you know, what piqued my interest when I was in South Dakota is like, let me try the Wind Cave. And then I said, let me go one step further. Let me try the Wild Cave tour, which for me, I loved it. Going through the little tunnels, as I mentioned in the intro. It's just, I agree with you. I love the exploring part of it. I think it's exciting, and you never know what you're going to see, especially with you, because you're going into areas where no human has ever been before. And it'll be the first time that you could find something amazing, or could be nothing, but either way, I would walk out of there satisfied.
Yeah, that's actually kind of the cool thing is, you know, even when you find nothing, you never find, depending on how you look at it, you never find nothing, or you always find nothing because it's space, right? When you're caving, you're looking for nothing. The bigger the nothing, the more exciting. Yeah, even when you find nothing, so to say, and this is where kind of some of the philosophy of exploration comes in. Your attitude means everything. And so like other people aren't going to go to these places that we go. They're very hard to get to. They'll never be developed into a tour. You know, in some cases, if a cave passage comes to an end, that may be the only visit from a human being that cave passage ever gets. If there's nothing a particular interest to study, there's nothing left to explore there. It's like sometimes you've crammed through this little hole and there's a little room and you're like, well, I'm going to leave this room and it will possibly never see light again.
Has there ever been a time where either you or a group that you're with will maybe take little explosives to make the hole a little bit bigger and find out what's on the other side, or you just leave it the way it is intact?
No, that actually can be done. And that's something you kind of learn, that as an explorer, you of course don't want to like destroy anything, right? Or like hurt the cave. But at the same time, sacrifices must be made for exploration sometimes, So sometimes there's like a cave formation that is a little bit rare. Like it's, definitely a formation that you find in every cave, right? But it's not everywhere, right? And it's beautiful and special, but it's like sometimes through exploration, those things get rubbed off or get dirty, or but if it leads on to miles and miles and miles of cave, I don't know. It's actually a pretty hard question to ask yourself. Progress at what cost? Does it really matter that you find miles of cave? I don't know. I guess I just don't know.
What is the weirdest thing you've ever found in a cave?
Oh, the weirdest?
Weirdest or most interesting?
So, this is interesting. This isn't really a cave. It's a mine. And I know sometimes people don't know the difference. Mines are man-made, caves are natural. There was a place where a sinkhole had opened up in a neighborhood, and we went to map it for them because it was thought that some of the houses could be in danger. And we went in and there was a place where I'm not even 100% sure how this happened, but there was a 1953 Ford sticking out of the ceiling of this mine.
God.
Like just rock all around it. And it was like, whoa, that's pretty unique. And what we think kind of happened is this was an old mine, and we think that there had been like other sinkholes and in the past, and people like kind of use them as garbage pits, maybe an old junk car, they just trashed it in this hole, and it, over the years just kind of sunk into the mine.
Imagine waking up for work one day. Well, I think I'm going to be a little bit late. Sorry about that. My car's in a mine.
Yeah, that's right. That's funny. Yeah.
So what happened? Did the neighborhood where the sinkholes were, did they realize that they were in the middle of a sinkhole and they called you and your team to investigate to find out what's going on?
We ended up stopping being involved with it because it turned into a very intense legal battle. And there is certainly potential for some of these people's houses to be in danger. But yeah, it turned into kind of a legal nightmare, and we just decided we'll let the experts handle that one. I don't deal with the law very well, or rules. I'm just an explorer.
Exactly. Nothing to see here. Keep moving. I'm with you. I just want to explore and mind my own business. I don't want to get involved in any of the politics or anything. So I don't blame you.
Unfortunately, politics seem to come up everywhere these days, especially, but there's politics around everything. And that's one reason that you like to go explore, is because, when you're going to a place where no human being's ever been, nothing exists there. So not even politics.
as I mentioned earlier, I love watching documentaries, and I have a streaming channel called Curiosity Stream. And there was a
Oh,
documentary I was watching called Underworld. It was all about different caves, and they had these explorers. And it was so interesting. One of the things I wanted to ask you, because you mentioned in the caves that you've been in, there's really nothing that exists besides microbes. But there was this one cave in Slovenia, and they believe that dragons lived in the mountains, and it was reinforced by small dragons being flushed out during rainstorms. And then in actuality, it was a rare creature only found in the Slovenia caves, and they were called Olms, O-L-M-S, and they can go without food for over 12 years. So have
whoa.
you ever found anything weird, mysterious, unknown living in the cave besides microbes?
No, nothing like that. And I'm just thinking, I don't think I've found anything like that. But I will say, I did a presentation once for a high school class, and the presentation was a lot of it was about the nature of discovery, of what it means to go into a place for the first time, and how literally anything can be there. And I remember distinctly this kid at the end of the presentation, he raised his hand and he said, "Are there monsters in the cave?" And I looked at him and I said, "We don't know."
Never know what
That's all I can say. And that felt good being able to say that. Knowing that there are places that we haven't been, and how can I say with certainty that I know that there's not monsters there? I mean,
I love it.
yeah.
Another thing in the documentary I was watching, they had people doing cave diving. Have you ever done that? Where there's so much water in the cave that they put on their mask, the oxygen tank, and just go in there and explore the caves underwater. Have you ever have any caves like that?
So we do have caves filled with water. And I know some cave divers. I have never done cave diving. I'm not a diver, which really you got to be a diver first. Maybe I have a mild interest in it, but from what I hear, it's just quite a bit more dangerous. Like cave divers do die. And I mean, if you're pushing the limits, sounds exciting, but I'm having lots of fun exploring air-filled caves, so I might as well just stick to where I can breathe for now.
Yeah, well, perfect example is if they were cave diving and they were sliding down and he lost his oxygen tank or his air, and there's nothing that he could do, and instead of climbing up for an hour, being able to breathe, he's going to hold his breath for a certain amount of time before his lungs explode. So yeah, I'm with you. I would rather be in a place where I'm able to breathe. Bring on the wind.
Yeah, I have a pretty good story though about that. Everybody really likes what they like, right? So there's caves that are better known for their wet passages than their dry passages, like caves in Mexico, cenotes, and all that. Well, there's two great big caves that they thought connected down there in Mexico, but they couldn't make the connection. And cave divers were the main ones surveying the cave. And cave divers, when they it's funny. Like when I'm exploring a dry cave, if I come to water, it's like, oh, well, I can't, oh, well. And then I turn around and go somewhere else, right? These cave divers, they're diving and they come to an air-filled passage and they're like, oh, well. And then they go back into the water. Like, I guess we better look somewhere else. Right. And it just shows you everybody just likes what they like, right? And one person's dead end is another person's world to explore. But what's interesting is somebody finally got the idea about these two big caves in Mexico that that they could connect maybe in the dry part of the cave, because people just weren't really like focusing on that. And my girlfriend actually went on an expedition out there, and they made some progress towards the connection. And on the very next trip after she left, they connected these two caves in the dry area. And we always teased her because one of our favorite caves in the area is Jewel Cave, which at the time was the second longest cave in the world. And once they connected these two caves, it surpassed Jewel Cave and became the Sistema Sakaktoon became the second longest cave in the world, and Jewel Cave got booted to the third. We always teased my girlfriend Renee. We always teased her about that. It's just like, oh, it's all your fault.
Yeah, thanks a lot. You want to know what's funny about Jewel Cave? Originally, I was going to do the wild cave tour there, but they have a test where you have to climb underneath it to make sure you're not too big. Yeah, I was too big. I got stuck in that thing.
The concrete block, yeah.
Yes, you have to climb underneath the concrete block. I got stuck in there. I said, yeah, we'll see how Wind Cave is. And that one went much better for me.
You actually don't even have to be very big to be too big to do that. I mean, it's only 8.5 inches high. So if you take like a dollar bill, I think the height of a dollar bill is like 7.5 inches, like the length of a dollar bill. So yeah, it's pretty low.
Can't be too many people that were able to get through that. I can imagine. Yeah. Did you have any issues at first?
No, I'm really small.
Okay.
It's caving is one of the few sports where the runt has the advantage. That's what people say.
So you started at an early age, I'm guessing, with your curiosity for exploring, hiking, spelunking. Is that true?
Somewhat. I actually didn't even really get into the outdoors until I was in high school.
Wow, that's a big switch.
Yeah, did my first backpacking trip in Michigan, in the Upper Peninsula of Michigan, when I was like a senior in high school, I think, like 2000, probably right around 2000, I would guess. Yeah, I mean, living in the suburbs of Chicago, you just don't. I don't know. I was gonna say you don't have the same opportunity, but I guess I just didn't find the same opportunity. There's cavers that live in Chicago, so I mean, I could have found that, but I didn't.
Well, I live in Connecticut, which is mostly woods, especially the areas I grew up in. So for me, it was different. I grew up all over the woods, and as I mentioned, my grandfather was the head of a hiking and caving club. So yeah, I was brought up interested in. And there's one, I'm not sure if you ever heard of him. Did you ever hear of the Old Leatherman? He's more from this area. Back in the 1800s. What he would do is, nobody even knows exactly who he is. There's so many legends, so many stories on him. He would do the same route going from New York through Connecticut back to New York, and he would live in all the caves along the area. And he became so popular that kids would actually, the teachers would let the kids out of school so they can give him food. And it's the exact opposite of probably what would happen now. Now they would probably, put him away for, get away from me, a homeless person. It would probably be a lot more, even though there were people that were mean to him. But yeah, nobody really knows who he is. And he wore, I want to say 10 to 15 pounds of leather at all times. So and he spoke French. So they think one of the stories would be that he was from France. His girlfriend's husband gave him a job at a leather factory. He took it over. The place went under. He lost his mind and just took off into the woods. That's just one of the legends. But in this area, there's at least 5 or 6 caves where he grew up in, lived in. And I was able to go to each one of them. And there was they found him in a cave in New York. He loved to chew tobacco, and he had lip cancer, and he finally succumbed to it. And they found him in a cave. Now he's buried in New York somewhere, and they exhumed his body probably in 2011, 2012. And they said there was really nothing left to it. So they couldn't do any DNA to find out who he really was.
Wow.
Yeah, if you look up the Old Leatherman, that's all you know about him.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah, it's really cool.
I bet most East Coast cavers probably are familiar with that legend.
Yeah.
It's kind of a regional legend, I guess. That's cool. I'll have to look that up.
Do you have anybody in your area besides, I know you mentioned a couple that that are legends in the South Dakota area?
There was a guy, the original explorer of Wind Cave, named Alvin McDonald, and he explored. I'm a little more fuzzy on the history of Wind Cave, but late 1800s, 1880s maybe, and he did some of the early exploration in that cave, which is pretty cool to think about, given that, gosh, you can hardly picture what life here would have been like at that time. But people would take like a stagecoach or something, and go up to Wind Cave, and it would take probably a whole day to get there from Hot Springs or whatever, and then they'd, I don't know, just trying to imagine what it would be like, and then trying to go on a cave tour if you're a woman, say, wearing these big poofy dresses, and just so different, so different, hard to imagine.
Yeah, no, definitely, I can't imagine. What I found interesting too is in the documentary Underworld I was watching, is they were explaining how caves were created. It's just water dripping thousands and thousands and thousands of years, and just the way that it creates all these different holes and structures. I know you know a lot about geology.
I'm studying geology right now. Mm-hmm.
Can you explain a little bit further for my viewers how caves are created?
Yeah, well, caves form in a lot of different ways. So the caves in the Black Hills are what I'm more familiar with. So the Black Hills are a result of what's called the Black Hills Uplift, and so there's like a little, you can imagine, do this right here. My background's kind of messing things up. It's making my head float. So I'll just explain it this way. The Black Hills are kind of like a pimple on the earth, right? Like you have this little like magma rising and sort of like creating this bubble on the earth. And what that was being pushed into is sedimentary rock. Sedimentary rock is rock that has it's formed from sediments. Obviously, sediments can be like shells of animals, or sand. You can imagine the different kinds of rock that are created by that. Sandstone, sand, limestone, right? Calcium carbonate, got all these shells and organic material. So you have that layer, right? And then in the Black Hills Uplift, magma is pushing up really slow and starts pushing through that layer, and it makes it so that the outer edges of it pushed through in the middle, but on the outer edges it left it kind of tilted, right, at like a small incline, and then it also like fractured all that limestone. So it's just like cracked, and it's got weaknesses in it. And then acidic water is the driving force behind cave formation. So acidic water mixing from the surface, mixing with rising groundwater, dissolves out all those cracks. Limestone, it actually does dissolve in acid. And so that's why they call it, like, truly it's solutional cave. And yeah, so that's the main way that like the caves here in the Black Hills formed. Pretty amazing.
Well, you mentioned that, what's the largest cave that you explored?
It would be Jewel Cave. I haven't been to the well, except as a kid. I've been to Mammoth Cave in Kentucky, which is the longest cave in the world, as a child, just on a tour. Don't really remember it. And then I've never been to any of the caves in Mexico or anything. So haven't been to the world's second longest. So Jewel Cave.
Not yet. I have a feeling you'll be there sometime.
Yeah, I think someday.
What about the smallest?
Oh, you know what is really funny? It's not like the shortest, but there is a cave called Pop Cave. And it's near this other cave. That used to be a tour cave. And Pop Cave was actually one of the early caves that I went into, and it was one of my first like major discoveries. So they called it Pop Cave because it's pop as in soda. So there's this bigger cave on the property that people did tours in, and off to the side there's this other very, very small like belly crawl cave, and they used to put the soda in there to keep it cold. So it's like, oh, that's the Pop Cave. So this, we have this caving called the Paha Sapa Grotto, and this guy named Mike Hansen, he knew about every single little hole and legend, and he knew about everything in the Black Hills there was to know about all these little tiny obscure caves that no one really knew about or cared about except him. And he always was telling me, you ought to go to Pop Cave, like, okay, I guess. And it hadn't been thoroughly explored, even though Pop Cave is like 300 feet long or something. But it was just like super duper 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 tight belly crawls. Like just like the whole time you're just like inching forward, like, 9-inch high passage for like 300 feet.
I couldn't get through Jewel Cave. I'll never make it for that.
Yeah, so like like the Jewel Cave, the block at Jewel Cave they tried to get through. It's like going through a passage like that tall, but like 10 feet wide, that tall, for like 400 feet. Wow. Even caves that are like small, you can usually like stand up in places, or at least like sit up in places and get like a break. This cave, you couldn't get a break. It was just belly crawl, belly crawl, belly crawl, belly crawl, belly crawl, belly crawl, belly crawl. And anyway, we went to check it out one time, and there was a few leads drawn on the map, and we went to one of them, and I crawled through and rounded the corner, and all of a sudden it splits in two ways, and I could actually crawl on my hands and knees. And it was like, wow, for Pop Cave, this is really good. And I looked at Renee, my girlfriend, and I said, okay, you go right, I'll go left. And I go left like 15 feet, and lo and behold, hole in the floor goes down like 15 feet into walking cave passage. And I was just so excited. That was my first discovery I ever made in a cave. It was like, oh my God, I found something. And we got out of the cave, and we called Mike Hansen. He's like, well, how was the trip? And we're like, we found walking cave. He's like, uh-huh. I'm like, no, we really did.
Oh, so he didn't even believe you. Really? That's funny.
No, he didn't even believe it. Because it was just it was just not thought to be anything,
Did you name that after yourself? Is this the Chris Pelczarski walking cave?
I don't even remember if we, what's really funny, all these years later, we still haven't gone back and mapped that. So it doesn't really have a name at this point. But I do remember there was a really good name that we came up with. There was this place where there was this cave rubble, like it's called breakdown, rocks, kind of a pile of rocks kind of coming out of the wall. And I came up with the name for that of Rubble Without a Cause.
I like it. Did you ever think of writing a book about your experiences?
Yeah, I've actually started working on a book about some of these experiences. It's at the moment it's tentatively called Living in the Light of Discovery. And the book is really about, I would say, the philosophy of being a pioneer. I would say that's actually ended up being one of the biggest themes, is like, what does it mean to be a pioneer? And what I really hope that people, when it's finished, what I hope that people will get out of it is inspiration to be a pioneer themselves in whatever they do. You know, because caving is like obvious pioneering, because you're going into a physical space nobody's ever been. But there's so many things you can be a pioneer in, and you know, why not? Why not go for it?
Exactly. I love that. I'm inspired already.
Yeah, cool.
So you mentioned that you studied geology. Did you go to school for that?
Yeah, right now I'm going to the South Dakota School of Mines. And I'm just really in my first year of geology classes. So, you know, getting a better grip on some of the basic concepts is where I'm kind of at.
That's something that you maybe in the future you want to teach, or you're using this right now to become more acclimated with what you're actually doing? And can you make a lot of money exploring?
I don't think you can really make a lot of money exploring. And I mean, no, I think most cavers pretty much either they live the ultimate simple life, or they have another job that they do during the week. You know, I kind of did that. I did the super simple life for a little while. Kind of like I was mentioning how I got into caving through Herb and Jan Kahn. You know, they lived in this off the grid house that called the Kahn Cave. It's not a real cave. It's like a shelter cave, you know, like you can't crawl into it. It's just a kind of a shelter in the, like a overhang in the wall. But they built a house around it in 1940, but no running water or no electricity. And Jan is 97, about to turn 98. And she actually, Herb passed away in 2012, but Jan lived in the Kahn Cave until just last year. And she's 90. She moved out at 96 or 97. No running water, no electricity. Amazing.
All the documentaries, some of the ones I mentioned, like The Alpinist and Dirtbag. Dirtbag's funny because he was such a minimalist. One of his friends found this really old, disgusting paper cup from McDonald's. So he threw it out. He goes, "Where's my cup? Where's my cup? I used that to get free coffee every day at McDonald's. If they have it's a free refill." And even in The Alpinist, he and his girlfriend lived in a tent for the longest time. But yeah, I mean, they just love what they do. It proves that you really don't need a lot of money to do what you want to do. It's just how you want to live. And they have that mentality, and I respect that and I appreciate it. It's like, you know what, you're doing what you love, you're having a great time, and I'm all for it. That's great.
Yeah, I used to, when I lived in my tent back in about 10 years ago, when I lived in my tent, I used to hitchhike into Rapid City, and I would go to Little Caesars, because you know they have the hot and ready pizzas, and at the end of the night they throw them all away. And like they were actually very nice about what they did. They wouldn't like just toss them in, like they knew that people needed them, and they would just take them and just set them on top of it, kind of in there real gently. And so yeah, we'd wait till Little Caesars closed and go grab these pizzas. And then my friend had an apartment there in Rapid, and so we'd take him over to his house and we'd reheat him in the oven. We always, you know, I'd give him a call and I'd say, "Hey, you want to go get a dumpster pizza?" Like, sure. Like, all right, I'll hitchhike over to Rapid and meet you at Little Caesars.
Like the Friday night special.
That's right.
I love it. You mentioned earlier that you were doing some lectures at schools. Do you still do that?
No, not right now. You know, I used to talk to high schools and you know, young students. That kind of fell by the wayside. I mean, it got a little, you know, I actually used to run a program that I was trying to develop into more of a business, or at least something that I could sustain myself. Speaking to students about possibility, and about some of the philosophy of what you learn as an explorer. And I think really the main message that I wanted to share, which I got into this a little bit earlier in the call today. Remember how we said limestone or caving? When you're discovering cave passage, you're really discovering nothing, because you're discovering the absence of limestone, right? Here's what's really cool about that. In actuality, you're discovering nothing, right? You're discovering this void. However, like, it's fascinating, and everyone wants to know, what did you find? You come out of this cave and no one knows what you found. All they know is what you tell them. And that is a perfect example of how you create your own reality. You literally create it. The places that I've been, the only way in which those places are known to humanity are in the way that I have chosen to describe them. And they're nothing. It's space. So talk about, creating whatever I want out of nothing. I mean, it's pretty cool. And in cave exploration, that's very obvious. It's a very obvious way to see this happening, but it happens in everything we do. It's all about the way we talk about it to other people, and it creates it that way for you.
How long did you do the lectures for?
It was like kind of the height of it was when my last interview with you. That was kind of the height of it, and maybe like a year or so. And I was working a lot with like local high schools, and going in and talking to kids about these kinds of things. And a lot of kids were like, whoa, like I've never been exposed to this. This is crazy.
Great thing. I would love for somebody, when I was younger, I would love for somebody to come to the school and talk about that. And I think it's even better now after the pandemic. Zoom burst into reality, and you can reach people all over the world just by hitting record. I think I would definitely sign up for one of your lectures if you did one online like this.
Thanks for, you know what? I mean, I might have to look into that, especially because like a lot of schools are wanting to go more over Zoom, and that alleviates a big problem of travel, and the expense of travel, and plus the impact of traveling, right? That's actually a pretty cool idea. And I think you're totally right. Kids really need to learn about possibility, because if you don't learn about possibility, by the time you get to be an adult like us, you're going down the path of no possibility. And then it's just random. It's just random.
I think kids also need to know that there's more to life than just waking up, eating, going to work, coming home, watching TV, going to bed, to start the whole system all over again. I think that kids need to know there's a whole life out there. And if they heard your stories, like me, I'd be fascinated by it. I'm like, you know what? If it's not caving, I want to do something that I'm passionate about. I want to try something. I want to be a pioneer. I want to explore. So yeah, I think that would be a good thing for you to get out to the kids, or even adults that would just love to hear these stories, and it probably and most likely would inspire them.
Yeah. You know what, Jan Kahn, the pioneer woman, I mean, she's been a friend, and she always challenges me with her philosophy. And two stories I have to tell about her. Two of the most memorable things she's ever said to me. One, she said, one time she told me that if you fully commit yourself to whatever it is you find meaning in, it's impossible to have any regrets.
I love that.
it's cool. And to extract that a little bit, I love the phrase find meaning, because it illustrates that really meaning is just where you find it. It's so individual, but if you stop, if you're like just not happy and don't know what to do with your life or want to make a change, and you just stop and just ask yourself that question, where do I find meaning? And then fully commit yourself to that. Yeah, you're living the high life all of a sudden. And Herb and Jan, they were masters of that. Like I said, I mean, I told you that rock climbing got too popular for them in 1959. I mean, that is outrageous. That's like, what? Oh my God, that's the golden era of climbing, when, a lot of cool stuff was happening and it was just wide open and people were learning how to climb harder things, and there was plenty of opportunity for exploration, and they just stopped finding meaning there. And they didn't question that. They didn't say, why did we stop? It seems like they didn't experience stress over it. They're just like, well, that just doesn't mean as much to us anymore. So we started doing something else.
I'm not sure, but I'm pretty sure I heard her expletives from where she lives when Free Solo won Best Picture for the documentary. No, it can't be. It never used to be such a tourist thing. It was ours at one time.
What's so crazy is you would think, that's how people would respond. And I will tell you that the wildest thing, she only did what she did because she found meaning in it. She didn't do what she did to gain anything, or, because someone else did something, it was literally just because they found meaning in what they did. And, so here's something that just happened to me yesterday. I gave Jan a call. I'm the chair of a big caving convention that is coming to Rapid City in June, and we're expecting like 1,000 cavers from around the country to come to Rapid City for about a week. And there's presentations on exploration in U.S. caves, international caves. We've got different welcoming events, sessions and seminars and talks on science, all kinds of really cool stuff going on. And see, Jan Kahn was a musician. She wrote all these wonderful songs about Jewel Cave, and she has this album that actually she produced that's kind of, well, it's relatively unknown, but it's a true gem. And it's just called like Caving and Climbing Songs, by Jan Kahn. And it's super folky, it's like authentic, like authentically Jan, authentically folk music. Got a lot of character. And I thought, she's gotten old enough now that even some of our youngest caving club members, like, they're like, who's Jan Kahn? What's this, what's this music? I don't know anything about this music. And I thought, how cool would it be if everyone who registered for our convention had the chance to purchase this CD? So I gave her a call and I asked her, hey, what do you think if I were to reproduce this CD and get your music out there? And because I said, Jan, your music is like the foundation of it's the foundation of the culture here. And what you guys did, we build off of that. And I want everyone to know about that. You know what she said? She said, oh, well, she said, I know you got to stand on our shoulders, but I don't think you said, you don't want to get stuck there. And I'm like, well, okay, sure. And I'm chatting with her more, and she's like, I wouldn't worry about what we did. That was a long time ago. It doesn't really matter what we did. And she said, I just think you should just look at everything with fresh eyes.
I I like that mentality, but I also like to know if something that I'm interested in. I will study and learn everything about that. So I would love to know, you know, the past and the pioneers from the past. So for me, I'm with you where I would love to have a copy of that if I was one of the cave explorers at that convention. But I know what she's saying too. It's like, don't look in the past, keep your eyes forward and look in the future. So I see both sides, but I'm more with you. I think that they should do that. I think they should appreciate where they came from and why they're here right now.
I do too. But I've been thinking about it for like a day straight because it was like such a big, it was a shock. It was like, oh wow. Like, well, why wouldn't you want your music shared with all these people? Like you made it. It's beautiful. It's great. It's a foundational like thing, And what I finally got out of it is just like what we were talking about meaning. And we were talking about fully committing yourself to wherever you find meaning. Meaning is such a personal thing. And some people are more aware of this than others, but I believe that nothing has inherent meaning, and an individual creates the meaning that it has through the experiences they've had. Because one person can experience something and say that was traumatic. Somebody else can experience the same thing and it is not traumatic to them. It's not belittling. It's not saying that people don't go through trauma. So I don't want to like take away someone's trauma, right? Like people go through things and that's real. And that is definitely not taking that away as an experience. But where I'm going with it is that Jan, I think, realizes that meaning is whatever you create. And ultimately, whatever meaning you create, it's insignificant. No matter what you choose to create, it's insignificant. Right? Just go big. Just keep going bigger if you don't get it. And eventually you'll realize it's insignificant. And I think that's ultimately like what she was trying to say. It's like, well, we did what we did. We found meaning in what we did. Now you're doing what you do, and you're going to find meaning in that. And you don't really need us for anything anymore. And it's all insignificant anyway.
That's impressive because most people, especially in this day and age, most people love the limelight. They love being the center of attention. So for somebody who's such a pioneer like that to say, you know what, that was nothing. It means nothing. Just move on. That is kind of impressive all on its own.
It's amazing. She invented, she's not credited with this, but Herb and Jancon invented the rock climbing shoe.
Oh, really?
They're not credited with that at all. I mean, it's unofficial, but like everyone was wearing mountaineering boots back then. And they noticed that like a tight fitting sneaker they thought might do a little bit better. And they wore Keds. They bought Keds that were like a size too small and just like crammed their foot into them. And because that like soft rubber on the bottom, it can kind of deform to the rock, they were able to climb more technical things. But so I mean, that was to me, that was the first climbing shoe. And you sit here and you think, what's the first thing everyone would be saying if someone said, oh, we started doing this, like, hey, that's $1 million idea.
Exactly.
She's not living a millionaire's life, I can tell you that. And it's just incredible that like that she was able to create so much meaning and maintain that it was insignificant.
What's also amazing is that not only one, but two, so I'm guessing her husband had the same mentality.
Yeah, he did. And I actually never met him in person, never talked to him, but other friends of mine did. And he was pretty reclusive. He was actually like a world-class mathematician. And he like corresponded about math by letter with people around the world. And he's actually listed on Wikipedia as being in the top 100 amateur mathematicians in the world to have lived. And it says next to it, says like profession, and it says rock climber. But yeah, he was one of the, and that's just like really cool, and here he is just living this humble life, like living like literally like in this shack in the woods. And, and they invented and they did all this great grand climbing and caving, and they're just like, well, whatever.
It's impressive that you said she's 97 years old and she's still active. I mean, maybe not climbing, but what I'm saying is she's still, you get the chance to call her on the phone and she still talks to you. She's still interested in what other people are doing. I love the fact that she's still involved in that part anyway, at that age.
Yeah, it is really cool. We actually make a point out of when we go on the really exciting trips in Jewel Cave where they explored. When we go on those trips, when we get out of the cave, we'll call her, and we'll and sometimes it'll be 2 a.m. I mean, we give her warning and tell her, hey, we're going to get out at 2 a.m. Can we call you? And if we think it's going to be a particularly exciting one, she's like, oh yeah, I want you to call me right away. And the phone rings like one time and she doesn't say hello. It just one time she goes, good, what'd you find?
Oh, that's great.
So sweet.
Does she still live in that little shack by herself?
This is the craziest thing. Her home, the concave, actually burned down last year in March, in a wood stove fire. And I mean, it's just crazy because it's the closest thing to like a genuine Hobbit home I've ever seen. I mean, this is like legit, totally, like I've never seen anybody live in a place like that, like for real. It looked like a movie set. And so sad that it burned down. She kept a daily journal since she was 18. So that's like 80 years or 79 years of daily journals, and all of those journals burned. And I know, and what's so crazy is I talked to her like a couple days after the fire, and she's like, I guess I have no choice but to move on.
Wow.
She's just so resilient,
Sounds that way.
Well, again, it just goes back to like the insignificance. I mean, she's just like, oh, well, that was fun while it lasted. I mean, she's just got this like lighthearted, like, well, that was cool. It's over now.
I think it also goes back to, as you mentioned earlier in the interview, about the pioneers early on, what life was like back then. I mean, she's 97 years old. She's seen a lot, been through everything. So when she first started growing up, life is so much easier now than it was back then. So she probably is, to her, like, okay, whatever. It's just everything is a grain of salt, which I mean is still very, very impressive. But so now, since that place burned down, where is she living now? Did she?
She's living. So she has some neighbors that they're close friends of hers. Lived here forever. And they're climbers, and she moved in with them actually. And they're kind of taking care of her. But it's like, what a lady. I mean, when I talked to her the other day, I'm like, well, what have you been up to, Jan? And she said, well, mostly just sitting around thinking. It's like, wow, okay.
Oh man, I gotta find out what documentary I saw them featured in. They weren't the main characters in that documentary, but I do remember those names. I do remember that name, especially since, like you said, one is from Connecticut, and maybe that was why I don't remember what I was watching, but I want to go on YouTube and see if there's anything on there. There has to be at least something, 'cause that they sound so interesting, and I would love to learn more about them.
I think it's called Up Not Down. Does that sound familiar?
It does sound familiar, yeah. I've
Yeah.
watched so many things. A lot of times I'll just go on YouTube and watch different things, and then that will lead me. If you like this, watch this, and then I'll start watching that. So that does sound familiar. That might be the
Yeah,
one.
look up Up Not Down. My friend actually produced that movie, and I'm in it.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Yeah.
I gotta check it out again then.
So I look a lot younger. It's about 10, 12 years ago now. I watch it and I'm like, oh man, I look young.
There was one place I want to go to. I think it is, I mentioned about tourist areas, and I think this has become such a big tourist area that somebody went there and they said the line was so long they left, but it's the Catacombs in Paris. Have you ever been there?
Oh no, I haven't. No,
I
it
would
sounds
love
cool.
to check that. Yeah, it sounds really cool, but a friend of mine went there and he said he wanted to go there, but the line was 2 or 3 hours long. He said, forget it. It's become almost like Mount Everest. In a way, people are not dying because of the extreme temperatures. They're dying because they're stuck in the mountain because there's 100 other people in line waiting to get up to the top. It's become like that.
Yeah, gosh. I know it's tourism is such an interesting tourism is really the other end of the exploration, or other end of the spectrum of exploration, really. Yeah. It's, talk about the opposite of going into the unknown, place where no human beings ever been. Then you got tourism, where people are capitalizing off of people, as many people as possible going somewhere. So interesting.
Like, hey, people are interested in this. We'll see if I can make $1 off of it. That's what everybody's thinking. It's like, how can I make money off of this?
I know, and it's interesting. Talking to Jan will make you wonder about a lot of things. She's got she was a pioneer, when she was young. She was a pioneer when she was 18, and so that's just such a unique perspective to have around still. Yeah, look up that movie Up Not Down. Recommend for you and all the listeners. I think you can get it on Vimeo. Yeah, my friend Josh Balt made that movie. He actually won the first place in the Black Hills Film Festival with it. And it's a fantastic movie about the history of the area and climbing, and doesn't really talk about caves, but that's okay.
There's a documentary that I can't remember his name, but reminds me of Jan, where he's dead now, but he was so old, and he just said, I want to go to Alaska. It was this remote area and nobody was around. He built a cabin from scratch. He killed all his food. He had nobody there. He lived there for over 20 years. He had one guy come in, I think maybe every 6 to 7 months, and just drop off food in a plane. That would be it. It's called Alone in the Wilderness. And there's part 1 and part 2, but it's people like that amaze me. It's called Alone in the Wilderness. I can't remember his name. Yeah.
Hold on a second. Let's say, is it this? Let's see if I can see it here.
I can't see it, but that must be the one. What's his name? That's it.
Get it to be able to see. But it's
that's the one.
Bob Swearer Productions.
Yep.
This looks like it's got to be it.
It is.
A friend that I just met up with last night loaned this to me. He just loaned this to me.
That's funny.
So,
you're gonna like it.
Sitting on the bookshelf.
Yeah. It's funny because I saw that years ago. I bought it, and then I didn't realize there was a part 2, which is part 1 is basically explains everything. Part 2 is more of the deleted scenes, but they're both great. It has such an amazing story, and now they made it into an historical landmark, so people can go there and check it out.
Cool. Yeah. It's
I love people like that.
It's so funny though. We've all talked about for many years the concave is such a special place, and we've all talked about like, well, what will happen to the concave when when Jan's not around, because she would hate for it to be some kind of historic landmark, or, because actually she didn't really let people come into the home. A few people got to go, but it was like you were very special if you ever got invited into the concave. And small handful of people ever got to go in. But so she was very private, and I think was a little bit kind of like, I don't know, not like ashamed of the way she lived, but just didn't like promoting it, I guess. And we just think it's so fitting that the concave burnt down, because that's pretty much what she would have wanted, or what she will have wanted when she's not around. She wouldn't want people tromping through her house going, "Wow, who lives here? This is amazing."
Well, now that you say that, it makes it more normal why she would say, it's time to move on. Maybe she realized that, after I die, this is going to become that. I really don't want this people traipsing through my house saying, "Oh my God, look at this. This is great." So now that what you're telling me now makes a lot more sense to me of why she would just be so like, okay, whatever, so apathetic about it.
Yeah. Well, anyway, it certainly formed a lot of the basis of my how I think about exploration, how I think about life, and how I think about how I explore the cave, and what it means to explore the cave, and how I tell the story of exploration. And it's all formed by my experiences, I guess.
Definitely. Now, in some of the documentaries I watched, they send people in to rescue maybe somebody that got caught in a cave or somebody that was lost. Have you ever been hired to do that, or have you ever been a volunteer to rescue somebody?
No, I haven't. But my girlfriend actually teaches cave rescue classes, and she's been on a couple smaller rescues. We certainly have friends that have been on cave rescues where people have died, which is really really wild. And that's sort of a whole other thing, I don't know, we talked earlier about whether or not you were asking when I go exploring these extreme places, do I think about the risk of death, and I guess it certainly can manifest sometimes. And I know that the people who have had who have been on the rescue end of something where somebody did not make it, it really did mess them up, where they were like not quite so keen to take risks. But
Unfortunately, I think what happens is the more afraid you are, the more worried you're going to be about messing up or slipping. That's when it happens, because you're too careful. I know it sounds odd, but I think a lot of times that happens where you're too careful, and that's where you're going to mess up, because you're being overly cautious.
Yeah, well, because some of your energy is being spent worrying, and instead of focusing on the task at hand. I actually have a friend, this is a whole other philosophy. I have a good friend that said, he says, making things idiot proof just makes idiots.
I love that.
And it does. But thinking can actually get you out of a lot of situations, right? But you notice when you're scared, you don't think, because your energy is diverted towards thinking about what could happen instead of what you can do. And so I think the people that do some of these extreme, make it through these extreme situations, I think they're just like totally and utterly focused on like the world of what's possible. Again, back to possibility. What's possible, not what if this happens, right? And Yeah, I've actually given safety talks before, and I've worked on a hot air balloon crew, believe it or not, and we do the safety seminar every year. And one year I told the owners of the balloon company, they asked me to do a talk on safety from the perspective of like a climber and a caver. And I told them, okay, I will. And you know, the name of my talk is going to be Safety is an Illusion. And they're like, awesome, go for it. So I did. I gave this great talk called Safety is an Illusion. And what it basically kind of uncovered is that what you were saying, actually, the number one time that the accidents happen are when people think that they're safe. When people expect to be safe, they stop thinking. And then they don't recognize when something's going wrong, or when they don't even know how to recognize that something's going wrong because they don't know how it works, right? That's what making things idiot proof just makes idiots. That's what that means, is that it's a failure of understanding the basic way that things work. And so you look at someone like Alex Honnold, who does all these solos and stuff. I mean, he just knows how it works really, really well. And he focuses on that,
That's what was funny, because in that documentary of The Alpinist, he was saying, he goes, people think I'm nuts. People think I'm on my mind. He goes, I actually know exactly what I'm doing. This guy, he just doesn't even test the mountain before he climbed it. I forgot what his name was, the French climber. And he just, he would, what impressed me about that documentary the most? It wasn't his climbing, it was the hula hoop. Do you remember that part?
I do. Yeah.
I was laughing so hard.
Yeah. That's awesome.
All right.
That is another
question. Oh, what was that?
One. Oh, that's another great movie people should definitely watch sometime. If you like the genre, what we're discussing fits right in, philosophy and, and all that, philosophy of adventure.
Well, I remember in the Free Soul, they did a brain scan of Alex, and it showed, like, I don't know if it was, not verbatim. I'm just taking the words out, like where I think the fear gene, which I don't even know what it's really called, but the fear gene was not really being activated in his brain. And they were saying a lot of the people that are like that, and probably in your brain too, there's something that doesn't get triggered by most people where, like, I should be afraid of this. I shouldn't really do this.
Yeah. I mean, there's a little, interestingly that we're talking about all this. When I drive to school, I drive about an hour to school every day. And I'm actually listening to the book, Alone on the Wall by Alex Honnold. And it's interesting because that came up in the book where he says in the movie, they really made it look like, oh, there's something, this guy's a freak, there's something wrong with him, and he just doesn't get scared like everybody else. And that actually comes up in the book, and he actually says, oh, that's crap. He says, that's not true. He's like, I get scared, and I can't quite remember how he explained it. I should go back and listen to that part of the book again. But see, so that's a little bit of the Hollywoodization of things, right? Where it's like, well, you gotta explain it somehow. And wow, this guy is amazing. His brain is different.
Yeah.
He's just like anybody else. He's just really good at what he does, and he's fully committed and super tuned in.
Well, you know what I laugh at? I know some amateur climbers, and they got mad because they said, oh, Alex is making, it's too dangerous, and he's making it look easy. And people, it's like, you know what? For me, who's not a climber, he made it exciting and made me want to become more interested in the whole climbing genre. So these people that were just not doing it professionally, but they were getting mad because I said, it seems like whenever somebody's on top, they just want to knock you down regardless. And these amateur climbers who thought that he was promoting bad climbing because it wasn't safe, just let him do his thing and do your thing and don't worry about it.
Well, that's unfortunate that they feel that way. And it's also unfortunate that that is the that's the attitude these days, right? Is that safety is actually it's becoming more and more pervasive in our culture, where safety is actually not considered to be the responsibility of an individual. Safety is always left up to someone else. How could they let that person do that? How could they not have blocked that off so someone didn't do that? How can they, and actually that's coming up more and more in national park caves where, risk is being evaluated sometimes by people who aren't even participating in the activity, right? And so it goes back to our culture, and of course the federal government is at the heart of our culture. And yeah, there's a big thing about risk out there and safety, and the driving message is it's someone else's responsibility. And yeah, I mean, when you're in a cave, I can tell you right now, it does not matter, it's all on you. Like I said, there's no access to resources. I mean, it doesn't matter what kind of form you filled out or whatever, you're still in the exact situation you're in. And the only way you're going to get out of it is by getting out of it.
And you can get injured doing anything. You can get injured or killed walking across the street. But as a pioneer, you have to try things that have never been done before, and there's always going to be an element of danger. And if you always were so safety conscious, nothing new would ever be found. Nothing new would ever be done. So I have the same mentality as you. It's like the safety should be up to the individual. If they're not hurting anybody else, you're not bringing anybody else down with them, let them do what what they're doing, and let them worry about their own life.
Yeah, safety is an illusion. I mean, that's what it comes down to. And I feel pretty good about kind of wrapping up the talk with that, giving people that to think about, is that just think. We just got to do some thinking right now. And that's not a political message. I know, unfortunately, like the way things are, saying that, people are probably going to associate with that with one side or another. I'm saying it completely independent. I just want people to think. I don't really care what conclusion people arrive at, but don't let your life don't let someone else be responsible for your life, both the safety of your life and the happiness of your life,
That is a perfect way to end this interview.
Yeah.
Chris, it was so great to have you on the show. And I promise this one will definitely be aired. As I mentioned in the beginning of the show, I had about an hour and a half interview with you last time, lost everything, never was able to air it. But now I'm glad, because I actually like this format better. So now it's on radio, but I'm also on YouTube, so people can see it all over the world if they want. And cool. When you come out with your book, please come back. I want to talk about it.
I will. Yeah, that sounds great, Rich. Thank you for, hanging on to my contact info for all these years and reaching out again. It was a pleasure to do the interview. It was fun.
Yeah, it was great having you on.
Thanks.
That wraps up the latest episode of the Claws Corner. A huge thanks goes out to Chris Pelczarski for taking time from exploring to be on the show. And I would also like to thank you, the viewer, for tuning in every week. Enjoy your day, everyone.
Now available in one collection. Confessions of a Frenetic Mind. 5 tales of blood-curdling terror. Available on Amazon and Barnes & Noble.